Welcome to episode 42 of Think Big with Michael Zellner. All positive, no politics. My guest today is Michael Graber. Michael is the founder and managing partner of Epic Pivot. Epic Pivot is an insights, innovation, and strategy studio in Memphis, Tennessee. Their goal is to make business a force of good in the world. He has advised over 200 companies throughout the United States. And Michael's also a musician and an author. Welcome to the show, Michael.
Thank you, Michael. It's an honor to be with you.
I appreciate your time. So tell us something interesting about yourself most people don't know.
What a way to wind up. Yeah, what a way to start. So most people don't know that my initial career choice was to be either a poet or a monk. And I started with an MFA in poetry and teaching creative writing at the university. And then what I learned was that although truth, beauty, and art are always worthwhile, the politics at the university scared me straight. And I found that there were many less politics in the world of commerce than in the world of education. So I became what I call a spy in the house of commerce. I still have those mytho-poetic sensibilities, more so than socioeconomic lens,
Right.
But I function that way in the world of business.
That's awesome. You know, you grew up in Memphis. You went to Christian Brothers High School. Do you have a few memories of your childhood that stand out the most to you?
Oh, I have so many, and they're so rich. Yeah, I really love growing up in Memphis. From the food, the music. I play music here, and I'm part of what I'll call the Great River of Memphis music, right? One of the bands is called the Bluff City Backsliders, which starts with jug band music and gets into Beale Street type music and takes it even further. So between the music, going to wrestling at the Coliseum on Monday nights,
Yeah.
right? And seeing that great theater was so fun, and then seeing how that became a worldwide phenomenon. But what I remember most is just how nice of a city it was, and just how civilized it was, even in the 70s and early 80s. And that's not a negative comment on Memphis. Culture and the whole nation has changed so much due to the advent of so many forces and factors, from cable TV to the internet to other aspects, globalization.
Right.
And so you see that everywhere. But we were just starting to really recover from the civil rights work and do that really, really well and integrate. And one last favorite memory I'll say is that if I look back at my high school, it really wasn't very diverse. But then my children, who are now starting at 30 down to age 12, but when I saw them with their school friends, there were people every color of the rainbow from about six different continents. It really has become a much more diverse place. And so the youth are leading our generation, getting away from what it once was.
You know, you bring up the Coliseum and wrestling. Those were some of my best memories of being a kid too. You going there. I mean, I talk about this a lot. The Coliseum was a great place for a concert, sporting event, wrestling. It was just a great atmosphere that was there. And
Yes.
I remember watching, Jerry Lawler, Andy Kaufman matches as a kid, and thinking as a kid, this is real. This is real. He's bleeding. And it's just, you just had so much fun. You got into it, and everybody just had such a great time back then.
Very much. And yes, I went to so many concerts there as well. My first concert, I was in kindergarten, was Kiss, a Live 2 tour with AC/DC, with Bon Scott singing opening up, right?
Oh, yeah.
I was the youngest of 3 children, and we were 5 and 10 years apart. So I got exposed to a lot of things early.
That's awesome. Why did you decide to stay in Memphis and go to Memphis State?
I actually moved away for my sophomore year. One, I wasn't going to go to college, and my dad just surreptitiously behind my back filled out my application form to Memphis State, and I ended up, getting in and having a good year and falling in love with learning. I thought it was going to be like high school, and I was not a good student. I just didn't understand the point, right? I just like, why do you need me to study? What's the end point? What's the output? How am I going to apply this? All those questions, I have a philosophical nature, just riddled through me. But then once I got in college, I was like, the sake of learning itself. But I switched to UNCA, the University of North Carolina at Asheville, and for my sophomore year. And then I had my first child then, and she was very sick with cystic fibrosis, and there were no specialists there, and we didn't have the support of family. So we packed it up and moved back home and finished everything here. And so grateful I did.
You know, you've worked in, and you talk about in the business world for most of your adult life. You know, what motivates you to continue to do that every day?
So this is going to be a long answer. I'm going to warn you on the front end, and it's going
Good.
to have two
I like
different
long answers.
rivers, two
Okay.
different rivers here, right?
Okay.
So we have a company called Epic Pivot, and at the heart of Epic Pivot was our former company. We merged with another company, but we were still the larger one, called the Southern Growth Studio. And the Southern Growth Studio launched 15 years ago. And we launched for this inspiration point in that was right at the height of when the chamber was pushing Memphis as America's distribution center. And simultaneously, they were doing what they called the Talent Magnet Project and the rise of the creative class, Richard's Florida work, and they had a conference here. But what we noticed was that Memphis was, for the first time in its economic history, seeing a brain drain. The knowledge workers were leaving in droves. So we came up with what we call the Old Miss Index. Where do Old Miss graduates go after graduation? They used to come to Memphis to work for Morgan Keegan, to work for FedEx, to work for International Paper. But now many more than 50% were going to Austin, Atlanta, San Francisco, New York, and it was up around 80s or 90s. And then I also noticed more and more of my children's peers and others weren't coming back. And so if you looked and sort of dissected that vision, America's distribution center, while we do have one large economic cluster, only one in Memphis, which is logistics, and we have to give it its due stature for what it's done, we are not nurturing another one, which is very dangerous, right? And then the majority of work is going to be blue collar, unconditioned warehouse jobs. So we're essentially turning ourselves into a third world country here, right in the heart of North America. And so what we thought is we've got to stop the brain drain. The powers that be, the nonprofits, the chamber, and others, they're not doing enough. If our calling card to the world is that we're going to be the distribution center, that means the majority of jobs are going to keep the tenet of civilization real low and the economic opportunities even lower. So we started the Southern Growth Studio, and that grew out of a software mortgage banking firm where I worked. We took the core team there, and we thought we would apply this proprietary methodology of management consulting and innovation skills. And innovation was just becoming a formal corporate discipline at that time. And really no one had heard about it in Memphis or Arkansas or Mississippi. So we were going to take a tri-state area with Memphis as the hub and do economic development via entrepreneurialism. That's what really woke us up. We were going to, and I'll give you one example, and that was African-American hair care. I don't know if you know this, African-American hair care and multicultural hair care, the majority of the companies that serve the world are here in Memphis. J. Strickland,
I didn't know that.
Ampro, others, right? They were all started by Jewish merchants back on Beale Street, peddling carts, and they've grown into these large empires, right? Many people don't know that. And what's so interesting is that they think of themselves as manufacturing companies, but actually they're brand companies, and they could compete with L'Oreal, but they're content to be on the bottom shelf at Walmart with $1 or $2 products instead of the top shelf on Target, competing with companies like Mix Chicks and others that are $27, $30 a bottle. And so it's all sort of in that Memphis mindset. We're poor, we make things. This is the industrial revolution, not the post-industrial world. This is the branded world. So what we wanted to do was to sort of catalyze an economic revolution and go to companies like those and every other privately held company, knock on door to door and say, hey, we have a formula for growth that's going to rise all boats, going to rise the whole tide of economic development here. It's not coming from the chamber. It's not coming from anywhere else. It's up to us, meaning you, the companies, right, to grow your own, to keep your talent, to challenge your thinking, change your mindset, and compete better internationally. So we knocked on every door of every privately held company. It happens that it was the height of the recession. We launched in 2007 in the fall.
Right.
That was right at the time of the mortgage meltdown. So no one wanted to talk about growth. Even just flat was good. So we were thrown out of every office for crazy talk, which became the name of our blog. We ended up doing probably 80% of our work out of market with very large companies, Claritin, Dr. Scholl's, Jack Nicklaus, things like that, right? Which I can tell you stories about any of those. They're fascinating. We called it the Beatles Strategy, where we had to go to Hamburg to be popular in Liverpool, right? And so we did it, and we did it for a long time. So that was the first piece of it, right? There's another river. Just give me a few more minutes.
You're good.
Yeah, okay. So then right when the pandemic hit, we suddenly had lots of existing contracts just evaporate, and we also had, like everybody else, a lot of verbal agreed on proposals just held up. And so we didn't have a ton to do. We had some work, fortunately, and we had one client here in Memphis with whom we've worked forever. I want to give them a shout out, Ring Container. They help with the Real Wolf River Conservancy and others. Wonderful, wonderful company. They even called and said, well, what else can we do? You've been such a great partner of ours. We don't want you to hurt, which was, you don't get that from many people.
That's
that
awesome.
Just says a lot about the character of the company and the character of our relationship with them.
Right.
But it caused almost the forced retreat of the pandemic caused an existential crisis within me, because we've worked with all these very large companies. That's actually closer to 300 now. From Kimberly-Clark Professional to, I feel like a NASCAR thing with all the logos on it. But we've done so much good work and made all these companies millions and millions of dollars, future-proofing their business, helping them expand their business model, coming up with radically new products and services, or turning into an experiential company instead of a product company. But it was kind of a so what? So what? Because as the pandemic exposed, people weren't happy in their jobs, hence the Great Resignation, right? And that's where they spend their most waking hours. And in reality, and I'm talking about material reality here, right? Earth, water, fire, that sort of thing. There really is no such thing as what Milton Friedman and all the economists from which we base our economic thought almost unconsciously, externalities for businesses, right? Waterways are poison. We've got islands of plastic growing weird bacteria. We're starting to see some aspects of human-driven climate change. All these things are coming. We are so politically divided that we have a crisis in truth and meaning, and no one knows where they stand anymore, right? And so nobody wanted to deal with any of those big pictures. And given these crises, the humanitarian crisis, the crisis inside corporations, and the crisis of faith that corporations were going to fix us, the crisis in politics, the crisis in truth and meaning, ultimately I had to ask my team, and we solve problems for a living, what we call wicked problems, right? What can we do? And so we follow this innovation process, and we said, well, what if we can flip the script a little bit? What if we can go and make businesses and the private sector do what governments and nonprofits have not been able to do, God bless them? Make it a better, more livable planet, right? Private sector has the scale, it has the impact, they can call on volunteers. People inherently want to do good, as we saw in so many aspects of the pandemic, neighbor helping neighbor, doing different things. Why not use that to catalyze this whole revolution? We saw that there was a whole movement afoot called conscious capitalism, and that led us to go deeper inside of that. And what we found, just give me 2 more minutes.
You're good.
Yeah. What we found is that how most people think about business, how I thought about business, are all these inherent defaults of I just got to make a living. I got to make the most I can. It's profit that matters. That's if you're not growing, you're dying. You can throw in all the aphorisms and all the way we think about people who work with us, human resources, just cogs in a machine. And we take all these things as absolute truths, but really it's just a fiction we've all invented, but we're all living the consequences. So why can't we rewrite the script in a way where it's much more humane? But the deeper we got into it, the deeper we saw that it's just I'll say MBA school, but what I mean is conventional thinking about business has handed down to us. Because if you read the roots of capitalism, it's not what we have. It's not corporatism. It's not profit at any cost. Adam Smith, Wealth of Nations, right? Beautiful book where we get the profit-centered sort of shareholder take of capitalism. But at the same time he wrote Wealth of Nations, 8 months later, he wrote The Theory of Moral Sentiments. And the way that I characterize it, that is, if Wealth of Nations is about the paternal hand and the competitive hand of capitalism, The Theory of Moral Sentiments is about the maternal hand, about how businesses are supposed to take care of its employees and the communities in which they serve. Why doesn't anyone ever read or quote this one, right? It's a big question. Similarly, a lot of people think of business in a very Darwinian context. Right? It's dog eats dog. It's survival of the fittest. And if you actually read Origin of Species, which we were geeky enough to do, they said survival of the fittest 4 times, but they used the word love more than 400.
Wow.
Yeah, and so given, and then I could break down and dismantle almost any department inside a corporation with the same kind of, it's gotten off track. So it becomes a grand question of how we fix it. And the last thing I'll say is that there are B Labs and B Corps for major corporations to fix it. And we have many, right? Danone, the big yogurt company, is a global B Corp now, which means they have to have a triple bottom line. It's not just about profit, but it's about profit, people, and the planet. And their board has to look at 3 sets of books on all 3. And then Ben and Jerry's is another great example. Even when they were bought by Unilever, because they were a B Corp, they couldn't change the nature of the company. So all of the goods they source have to not only have an economic good quality product at a good quality price, but they have to have a social good baked in. So let's just take one example of a few of their ingredients. Greystone Bakeries in Long Island, right? And that's where they get all their cookie dough and all their brownie and brownie batter. Greystone Bakery started out as a Zen retreat center for recovering drug addicts and ex-felons and felons who are out. And then they started saying, well, what these people really need are job skills, life skills, credit restoration. So they started a bakery and they started employing the unemployable, teaching them life skills, and then setting them up for credit restoration and all these other things, and watching these lives flourish in new ways and giving people a true second chance. Ben and Jerry started, with a few $100,000 a month, but now it's about 400 million a year of lives impacted. And that's just one of their suppliers. So then you just multiply the exponential factor. What if every company did that? And so our take of it was that B Labs and B Corps are great, but not every company can re-charter as a B Corp. It's only allowed in 44 states in the US right now. And other companies just can't because of their board or governance or other things, but they could still have a purposeful transformation and align around a purpose and decide what their purpose is. So there's one manufacturing company in Atlanta called Impro. That's a global company with about 26 plants. And they're what they call a dual purpose company where, yes, they have to be profitable, but then they're also about human flourishing, that everybody works there. And let me be real clear. When they get together and they work on these inside skills of the people to make them better people, they look at 2 sets of books doing that. And it's not just for upskilling to make them better at their jobs. It's to genuinely make them better people. And they'll interview their spouses and children or significant others, whatever it may be, to see about that growth and progress.
Wow. I love learning things that I don't know. I love learning about things, and you just taught me a lot right there. So I appreciate that long answer. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
What is your typical morning routine like?
Good question. I wake up about 4:30 or 5. I have coffee and read, usually some kind of arcane spiritual literature, and meditate for a while. And then I keep the meditation going. I call it a meditation in motion, where I have to embody it. So I do some form of yoga or strength training, and then I run for at least an hour, and do all. It's about a 2-hour routine before I'm able to even utter a syllable.
When you first started your company, was there anything beside, outside of the pandemic? And I know you explained why you started and everything, that was more challenging than you thought it would be?
Yes. And so much. And so I need to add a little more context there. I won't talk forever. We sort of dumbed into that as well, the change with Epic Pivot that we made. And it was last February when we rebranded. But even though we do the innovation, insights, and strategy, we were called by two large companies, one, the world's largest nonprofit, and another, a large hospitality company. And they wanted to know why their transformation had failed. And so we reversed engineered and figured out, well, people didn't know why they were transforming. They didn't know what they were transforming into. You gave them no purpose to around which they can align, all these various things. And so we were able to break down the anatomy of what would take to be a transformation that actually works. It's not just about the machines and the digital, it's actually about the people and the cultural, and you have to bring everybody on board. It's not just change management. They need to own it personally, et cetera. And so watching how many failed transformations are, and then the sort of superficial reasons that people transform. Oh, we need a digital transformation because the world's going digital, but not. It's because that's how we're going to better serve the people with whom we're in a relationship. Those kinds of things really led to it. And so to answer your question directly, what we found is there's a great appetite to talk about purposeful transformation, and a lot of fish nibbling on that bait, but no one actually wants to change. Change is hard, right? And there's a whole change problem. You have to surrender to it, almost like a caterpillar surrenders and becomes what they call a imaginal self, pure fluidity inside the cocoon, right? And so it's to want to change, similar to want to run a marathon, is one thing, but to get out there and lace up your shoes every morning and keep going, rain, snow, sun, whatever, is quite a different matter.
Right. Michael, I had your brother, Greg, on a few months ago, and I've worked with him on and off for about 7 years or so. I reached out to him on Facebook back in 2015. He's had a really big impact on my life. He taught me a lot of things. I worked with him one-on-one, over the phone. And it took me a little while to finally implement things, but when I did, it's amazing how well they worked. And he said of you, quote, "I love him. We are different, but love each other," unquote. Tell us about the Greg that you know.
The Greg that I know is such a beautiful man and such a loving and wise human. We would be friends now if he weren't my brother, but it wasn't always that way. He is proof of the fact that if you have a meditation practice, that you really do change, develop, progress, and that you become a boon unto your community and your family, right? Earlier in his life, I mean, it was war all the time between us, just sibling rivalry, right? And always, right. He was more the mother's child and I was more the father's child, and he pit me, and it was all, and I didn't want to play the war and he did, and so, right. So I just retreated for the longest time. And, but now I can't say enough good things about him. But the main thing I was going to say is what he teaches actually works, and he is the pure proof of it.
Absolutely. What is the one tool that you always carry in your toolbox, no matter what company you're working with?
Deep listening. And what I try to listen for isn't always what's said, right? I'm trying to get to the dynamics of the place, almost the systems level of the place, where decisions are made, where budgets are hidden, what's not said.
What's the best compliment you've ever gotten?
I really am I try to practice humility. And so I always burn. I have a hard time that's the one place, that's my weak point. We do these workshops where we get into human-centered workshops, and we go through and we write down what you like, what you wish, and what you want for the other people. And I had a client with whom I'd worked. She was at Dr. Scholl's and forever. And she said, "Oh my God, I've never seen you blush. I've never seen you get nervous, but trying to hear all these compliments is so difficult." So this is hard for me to answer.
I understand.
But I'm going to say that I heard it yesterday. We did a human-centered boot camp for a large corporation here in Memphis. And they said, "I wish we worked this way all the time."
You know, you're unique in that you're a successful businessman and a really good musician too. You talked about being anxious as a kid growing up, and you turned to music to find some peace in your life. Tell us a little bit about what music has done for you.
The great poet Charles Simic, who was Yugoslavian and was there during World War II, then came here. He's an American citizen. He's been a poet laureate before. He said that jazz made me American, right? And I would have to just build upon that, and that music has made me really a Memphian. And it's provided not only the soundtrack, but the story and myth through which I can read my life and understand my emotions. So without it, I would just be such a basket case, such a mess. It really has given that context and understanding that has civilized me and made me a better person inside a community.
What has been the biggest failure that you've had, and what did you learn from that experience?
There have been so many failures and failures on it, and I love failure. I embrace failure. My biggest failure is probably a divorce, I would say. And I've had two, proud to say. One was more civil than the other. What I learned was twofold. First, not letting go soon enough and holding on to what I call the false sin of hope can cause more damage than good. Right? After something's just dead and gone, and it's a toxic environment, not being able to walk, to read that and be honest with yourself. So that was a great gift. And the other is that I'm going to quote Carl Jung, and the great psychologist. Whenever anyone came to him and said that, "Oh my God, my spouse just died, my parent just died, my child just died, I got fired from my career," if it was bad news, he would go get a bottle of champagne, pop the cork, and say, "Congratulations, something wonderful is going to happen to you." So no matter how badly, and Greg and I, our father committed an alcoholic suicide. We've grown up with challenges like everybody else there. I don't mind saying that, because it seemed dreadful at the time. We both got thrown into therapy but even that has been such a great gift. That's what has personally made me being able to go into an environment and listen so deeply, and I'm attuned to the dynamics because I grew up in an alcoholic family, right? So what you think may be your weaknesses actually may be your greatest gifts, is the point I'm trying to make.
Who has been the most important professional mentor in your life?
I would say Jay Morgan. And Jay Morgan lived in Memphis for a long time. Then he lived in Basel, Switzerland, and New Jersey. Jay worked Victoria's Secret's, Bed Bath Beyond, but then he was at Shearing Plow, and he was our client at Merck and at Bayer Consumer Care. And we worked on every brand that they had together. We also started the Memphis Innovation Boot Camp together, just because we wanted to give away these tools and build up a community of corporate innovators. And he's such a spark. And what I noticed was that he started his life as an engineer and saw that the whole business of value creation was broken. So then he got entranced with these innovation techniques and was so passionate and expressed it at a global scale. And just to see his enthusiasm, his humanity, how he surfed and navigated through these large corporations to be able to cause these revolutions inside that are still have great weight today, have been so inspiring. And I will say that Jay now is a partner at Epic Pivot, and we went through a merger. So I still get to learn from him on a daily basis.
You know, you're on the board of Mid-South Sober Living, which is a nonprofit program that was, you know, founded in 2008 for the purposes of, you know, creating sober living and transitional housing centers, you know, for people who are new to recovery. Tell us about them and why you got involved working with them.
Right. Well, given my history with my father that I mentioned, and, you know, and watching alcoholism in a family system for a long time, led me to get to know so much of that population. And they truly are misunderstood. And there's often such a need where someone has burned all the equity in their existing homes and jobs. They have nowhere to go. There are no turnaround centers. So they end up in jail or the crazy house or whatever. And there needed to be a safe place that they could go to and have everybody learning these new habits, these healthy habits, learning these new practices, and starting a new routine so they can start their life over. And there just wasn't many. And so traveling a lot all over, I would see that there were whole hordes of these houses, 30 houses in Nashville, let's say, right? And they know how to do it, but we didn't have that here. So my friend Andy Branham came to me, who started it. And then he worked with Walter Williams and said, hey, we really need this here. And I was so happy to be involved in the turnarounds we see at those places. Granted, the statistics aren't as high as you would like. You know, it's hard to change, right? As we talked about earlier, personally and professionally and corporately, but it's good. And what we've done is not only have houses for men and women who are recovering from alcohol or drug addiction. We're starting other houses just for the opioid crisis specifically. And then working with the courts of Memphis, we started Judicare, which is a center just for recovering vets and police and fire workers, where they can be safe in community. So it's been great to see the lives that actually transform as a result there. It's its own reward.
Sounds like a wonderful organization. Absolutely. You know, you talked about you worked with a lot of different large companies over the years. You mentioned FedEx, I think ServiceMaster, St. Jude, and you talked about Jack Nicklaus, you know, just to name a few. What has that experience been like for you to be able to work for such big businesses and help them even, you know, succeed more?
It's always a great honor. It truly is. And what is so fascinating is that we see ourselves as representing the mindsets, the behaviors, and practices of the healthy work model of the future. So they don't know quite what they're getting, what merchandise they're ordering when they bring us in. They think it's just to make a little more money. But then once we get in there, we're able to, if you just move this, change this, yes, but you're going to have to change your business. Things start flexing and the wake is just phenomenal. I mean, and even that's true at the organizational level, but then also at the personal level. So one person with whom we work, she worked actually on all of they call it packaging, but it's the containers for different small medical devices. But she came alive to this human-centered technique, and she realized that she didn't want to just focus on the packages, but she wanted to always work with the people who use them. I'll give you even a better example. We were working on an eczema project, and I took who was then a 62-year-old. This is a man who had one of two who created what we call the SPF spectrum for sun protection, right? But we were working on eczema. And I took him and we went inside the homes of a few eczema sufferers using what we call human-centered practices. And we started to unpack their rituals, and we heard that it's a living hell. Nobody understands. I have to put Clorox in my bath. And they would show us the Clorox in the bath. And when I go on vacation and get a flare up, my family just leaves me alone in the hotel and I'm literally just burning. We went back to the car after the third interview and he said, I feel like I've wasted my whole career. I was like, what do you mean? His name's Tom. It's like, well, it's always been about the formulation, about the chemistry. But now I'm going to go back to the office and I'm going to go focus on coming up with a solution for Megan. So I'm going to take that further. At that particular company, we introduced a lot of people who were working on things to the people for whom they're creating solutions. And we made posters of the people. And this was a global company. And there was a town hall where we didn't know that they did that. The president of this global company showed the posters of people like Megan and Susie and Carlos and whomever, and said, these are the people we're working for, and this is why we do what we do. So the greatest pleasure is watching them connect from just being an entity that wants to make money to an entity that helps people. Now, what it's done for me personally is probably a bad thing. My wife always says I'm hell at cocktail parties because I know the arcane details of about 300 industries, right? You want to talk about adhesives and laminates? Let's go to the corner, right? You want to talk about very, very sustainable air conditioning units that are zero net energy? Come on, let's talk about, that sort of thing.
Some people start a business because, they don't really have any, clear cut direction of where they want to go with it, and if they do know that, many times they just don't know how to get there. How do you help companies set and achieve long-term goals?
That's a great question. We have a full process for doing that. And it's not just goal setting as in creating a fiction here. We're not the types of consultants who are just going to take what they say and then put it in a PowerPoint and make them seem more focused than they are. We really get inside their psyche and figure out what matters to them, why it matters, articulate something that is typically not articulated ever. And your question said that their philosophy of business, right? Why are we doing what we're doing? And then once they have that, they have not only the goals set and articulated and the strategy written, but they have all the motivation to align the whole culture to do it, right? And so that's the real magic.
When you were a child, you climbed up a tree and you were scared to climb down. Greg said he left you up there. How did you finally get down, and what did you do to him when you did?
Oh my goodness. So yeah, we had a lot of woods where we were so blessed to grow up in old Germantown when it was really still out in the country, and spent most of our time in the woods. I have a dreadful fear of heights. And I climbed all the way up into about a 4-story tree house, then looked down and immediately just lost. I had a full panic attack. I was too young to know what that meant. Sweaty, palpitating, my eyes were bugging out of my head. And I said, go get my brother. Please, somebody, I can't come down. And so it took about 20 minutes, but they found Greg. He was playing soccer, which was his passion. He was very upset that I had interrupted his game because they were winning. And he just looked up and he just said, in front of all my friends, all my peers, you chicken, how dare you interrupt my game? Why would I help you? Get down yourself. And he just rode off, and I was convinced at that point that A, I couldn't trust him, and B, I was ashamed. And I don't even remember how I got down, but when I got home, it was about a 3-year wall of silence between us. I just didn't trust him and didn't want to interact and didn't want to go there. And I didn't feel like I could call on him for help. And what he actually did was a great gift, making me come down on my own resources. I was just too immature to see that at the time.
Right. It's amazing the lessons that we learn when we don't know we're being taught something.
Exactly. Yeah.
What do you believe is the most unique skill that you have that you've helped that's helped you become successful and in turn helped other people and other companies to become successful too?
I would say that it is passion, because once there is passion around a subject or around an initiative, that is contagious.
Absolutely. If you could play your music for any historical musical figure, who would you choose and why?
I'm going to go with the way back machine here. And I'm going to pick Hoagy Carmichael, the great songwriter and singer. He's been in many movies. He wrote Georgia on My Mind and many other hits. I just think there's no greater American songbook than the songs of Hoagy Carmichael. And I would just want to get his critique of these songs and maybe see if he would play some with me. As you know, you're good if they name a sandwich after you, is what I always say.
It hit me when you just said that right there, the name Hoagie, right? Obviously, that's awesome. You said, quote, organizations have come under pressure to redefine how they create value in the world, unquote. What are the keys to building a great team and organization?
I'm going to jump back to that quote first, and then I'm going to answer your question. So a lot of what we do at Epic Pivot is reframing what we think about value. And I talked about, coming into conscious business and what is value and what is not value. Is value just profit, or does value mean I have really, really happy, infectiously joyous coworkers and people who work with me, and I have long tenure of employees, and the community likes me and appreciates me, and I'm not poisoning any systems, right? What is value first is, and each organization needs to answer that for themselves. But then the question is that we work with teams so that they are not only aligned to an initiative, but they have new methods, mindsets, and skills outside of the old way of doing business. I talk about this term human-centered a lot, and there are all these different mindsets such as radical collaboration, craft for clarity. I could keep going here, but this isn't about human-centered design, but to work with the inner dynamics of the team so they know each other's strengths, weaknesses, and they're also able to put off the hat. Hey, I work at X company and I've got this role, and you work at X company, but instead it could be Michael to Michael talking at a very human level. Humans just trying to solve human problems for other people. And that's the real power.
Epic Pivot is obviously it's a unique company. I haven't heard of anyone that really does what you do, but I'm sure there are people that you do have competitors, something maybe not exactly what you do, but similar to what you do. What is one thing that sets you apart from most of your competition?
The ability to execute and sell it inside the large corporations. I'm going to give you an example. So even when we started working with Jay Morgan at Merck Consumer Care, they had already worked with some of our almost pure competitors. I'll give a few names. IDEO is a huge international innovation consultancy. They're wonderful. Gravity Tank is another. They've been bought up by one of the consulting firms. And what they did is they spent several $1 million and they started working in this new way. They got beautiful, outrageous concepts, shape-shifting stuff, right? And it was delivered very, very well wrought professionally. But then it became what we call a very expensive door stopper. Nobody could ever, ever, ever take the concepts in this portfolio and all the insights that were in there about the changes in the market and activate them. The brand managers, the product managers, they were too far away from their core and they weren't initiated into that change journey. So what we do is that we take stakeholders, some from, we'll call it product manufacturing, R&D, engineering, or if it's a software company, the developers and the UX people, along with those who have to sell it and market it, the commercialization teams. And we have them walk along the whole journey with us. Then they're able to talk inside, do this, what we call the storytelling, to make sure that the company is going to place some bets away from just their core growth and get to adjacent and transformative growth, But without taking people on that journey and them understanding why and why it's important, they don't stand a chance. So really, we specialize in the application and pragmatic embedment of this kind of work, not just what we call innovation theater.
How do you keep learning and add more value to what you do?
I'm just wired that way. It's probably, I have an insatiable curiosity, and I read a lot. I'm kind of old fashioned and geeky, so that helps.
You just recently, you talked about I think you said yesterday, you led a company you called a design thinking boot camp focused internally on communication. What was that? What was that like? And what's one takeaway you got from teaching that?
People inside of traditional corporations are tired of being handed down limited truths. And they want to know, they don't want to have selectively have somebody else decide for them what they can know. They want to know the whole story. They want authentic, honest communications, and they want it in a way that they can digest. They don't want it to just come top down. They want it in a way where it's two-way and they can dialogue about it. One of my favorite psychologists is James Hillman. He says conversation is consciousness. So they're not even able to digest it unless they can talk back. And if a corporation doesn't give them the mechanism to properly digest, talk, and we'll say co-create it, then it's never really going to be implemented anyway. It's just a dictate. And nobody in our era wants any more dictates. That's why we have the Great Resignation. No one wants to be told what to do. They want some authority. They want to be the author of their own lives inside a large organization, which means you have to give them some power and you have to give them some respect as a human.
I mentioned earlier, you brought up, author, that you are an author, and tell us a little bit about your books, The Last Medicine Show and Going Electric, Tales of Innovation from When Rock and Roll Was Born.
Thank you. So yes, I've always written. And when we started our business, I wrote a weekly article for about 12 years. And maybe a fourth of those articles are gathered inside Going Electric. And it really helped me personally to take everything I learned during the week and then distill it down and be more articulate that was actually learned there. And so that way I could share it and be more effective in the next meeting, in the next sales job, whatever it may be. So that is that collection. I've since been a part of another book about, again, where capitalism is going to help heal the planet, which is great, and how innovation plays a role, because at innovation, we start with empathy, which leads to compassion, which leads to sort of reframing business anyway. And that is called The Other Side of Innovation. And then The Last Real Medicine Show was a collection of poems. I also have several other unpublished books, another what I'll call wisdom poetry, almost like a Rumi or something, reflections from meditation. And then there's another that you might find of interest because it impacts Greg and me. It's a generational memoir. So our father, and one reason he committed alcoholic suicide was because he was one of the babies at the largest baby scandal in the world, which happened in Memphis, the Georgia Tan and the Memphis Children's Center. So they would go and get all of these children from all over the South and have their mothers unknowingly write away their rights and give away their children. They thought they were just getting medical care. And then they would put them in bad conditions. Many died, dysentery, diarrhea, etc. But then they would sell them as members of the tribe, as Jewish babies. This is how Joan Crawford got her child. They sold predominantly in New York and also in LA, but they sold quite a few here as well. But it was a whole generational memoir about what happened here in Memphis, how it impacts one family, and what the whole journey is like. And that was all part of Boss Crump's machine. Judge Camille Kelly was a part. It was a whole system that we had here. I have to say, there really aren't any good guys or bad guys, although it's easy to do that. They had a almost Victorian sensibility. Georgia Tann was the lady who led the Tennessee Children's Home, and Judge Camille Kelly. They thought they were doing what was best for the children, right? They really thought that they had no chance living almost a 17th century backwoods lifestyle, right? And that putting them in a more industrial setting was better at that time. So I don't want to come across as being judgmental here. I was trying to be empathetic and love all the characters and deeply understand, but it's really one family's journey through that. I sold that book, but then the company got sold and it never got published. So
what are the most important lessons that you've learned in your life?
That's such a difficult question, isn't it?
It is.
Lessons. To approach everything with reverence, to be grateful no matter what, to try to learn a lesson even if it feels like hell, and then ultimately only love matters, and that's love for my clients, love for their problems, love for my family, love for their problems, love for my friends, love for their problems, and just to try to help people if they ask for it. I only try to help that's the other I'll say, is that only help those who are willing and capable of receiving help, and only if they ask.
How can people find you and find your business online if they want to follow you on social media?
Thank you. We're at epicpivot.com. We also have a LinkedIn group, Epic Pivot. We have a Facebook group. You can also find me. I'm very active on LinkedIn. I publish a lot of articles there now and other places. So you can find me, Michael Graber, on LinkedIn.
Michael, I really appreciate you coming on today. It's been really awesome talking to you. I've learned a lot, and like I said, I love learning. I'm like a sponge. I love to absorb things. So you've taught me a lot about things that I did not know about. So I appreciate your time today.
Well, Michael, I have to say that you are the best interviewer I've ever experienced. And I'm not saying that in any kind of superlative way. You've done your homework. You asked the right questions. You asked difficult questions with a smile. So thank you.
I appreciate that. That means a lot to me. So thanks, Michael. You have a great day.
You too. Thanks again.
Thank you.